Okay, I'm hopefully that we're recording, so I'll begin the session. I'll just turn on the slide presentation and introduce our three presenters this morning. Welcome everybody to this fresh webinar, fresh open web meeting, which is our regular bi-monthly meeting, as well as these roundtable discussions. So I'm really pleased to be welcoming Yongfeng Liu from UNESCO, who is the program specialist, does several issues like this, and it's really a pleasure to see Yongfeng on the line, and James and Christian. James and Christian are members of the task force, the scientific task force that developed the document. And so we'll be going through in the order on the screen, as you see now, with the three gentlemen, and looking forward to the presentations. At the end, we'll have discussion questions and open it up. If there are, as we do for these sessions, the session is being recorded, and the resources in the recording will be posted on the Fresh Partners website. So I'm just going to start the slides from the beginning with the full screen. Here we go. Yongfeng, do you want to start us out?
Thank you, Doug. So good morning or good afternoon, colleagues. So I'm actually covering my colleague, Christophe Curlew, who was supposed to join and present. But unfortunately, he cannot make it today due to other commitments. So I'm going to just start this presentation. Can we go, the next slide. So basically just to mention two key events, the recent events. One is on the 5th of November last month, the first ever celebration of the International Day against violence and bullying at school, including cyberbullying. So this International Day was declared by UNESCO last December, aims to eliminate violence and bullying at school, including cyberbullying, so that all children and young people can fulfill the right to education, health, and well-being. So each year, this International Day will be observed on the first Thursday of November, basically to raise awareness, the global awareness around these issues. So the theme of this year's International Day was Together Against Bullying in Schools, as shown in these slides. So this theme was chosen to serve to underscore that bullying, including cyberbullying, is the most prevalent form of school violence and infringes on children and adolescents' right to education, mental health, and well-being. So linked to this International Day, the International Conference on School Bullying was a key global event to mark this International Day for the first time. It was co-convened by UNESCO and the French Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport. And it was an online event aimed to build global momentum to end bullying in schools by raising awareness of the issue, hearing what works to address it, and mobilizing government experts and the educational community. So this conference built on the commitment made at the meeting of G7 ministers of education under the French presidency in July last year, 2019, and contributed to the new International Day on the 5th of November. So next slide, please. Prior to this first International Day, and in preparation for the International Conference on School Bullying I just mentioned, UNESCO and the French Ministry of Education convened a scientific committee to lead a process to reflect on the most effective ways to address bullying and cyberbullying. So this scientific committee was comprised of experts from different regions of the world working on the prevention of school bullying, as well as French experts advising the French Ministry of Education. Two wide consultations were organized to inform the process, one among the French Committee of Experts, and a virtual consultation among about 50 renowned international experts from a variety of institutions, including academics, representatives of government, non-government organizations, and UN agencies, to collect their opinions on what works to prevent and address bullying and cyberbullying, including scientific evidence. So the result of this process is a document consolidating recommendations by the scientific committee on preventing and addressing school bullying and cyberbullying. This document presented at the international conference, which addressing these three elements as shown in this slide. One is about a more inclusive definition of bullying. Two is about effective approaches to respond to bullying. And three, responding to cyberbullying more effectively. So here today we have the
Chris, sorry, Yongfeng, can you stay close to your mic? Your sound is fading in and out.
Okay, sorry. So here today we have two members of the scientific committee, the international experts. Professor James O'Higgins-Norman, who was the co-chair of the scientific committee, who is also a UNESCO chair on tackling bullying in school and cyberspace, and the director of Irish National Anti-Bullying Research and Resource Center of Dublin City University, and also Professor Christian Berger, professor in education psychology at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile. And so I would like to just hand it over to these two experts who continue and present the key recommendations made by the scientific committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Yongfeng. James?
I will take the lead from now on.
Oh, sorry, Christian, go ahead.
Thanks, Yongfeng, for the whole UNESCO team for the work in this presentation and throughout the preparation of the international conference. And also thanks, Doug, and the International School Health Network for allowing us to share some insights and recommendations. So we know what works to prevent school violence. This is often described as the whole school approach, meaning that violence prevention at the school level can work only if the whole education community and the whole school community is involved, right? However, research also recognized that school violence is not confined to the school boundaries, but is also intertwined in a broader ecological niche. Therefore, beyond the whole school approach, it is important to design and implement a whole education approach. That means recognizing that schools exist within a wider educational system and community, and that happens even in countries where schools are very autonomous. Therefore, successful responses to school violence reflect the interconnectedness between schools and the wider community, including education, technological systems, which is very important for the case of cyberbullying, and societal systems. This is not to say that the whole school-based initiatives are wrong or ineffective. However, what we are proposing is that they tend to fail to recognize that the local school exists within a wider educational system and community that is supported and maintained by the society. So a whole education approach ensures that local school initiatives recognize the importance of this interconnectedness, including education, technological and societal systems, values, pressures, and which can impact on the prevalence and type of bullying and cyberbullying in schools, but also on the most effective ways to address it. Right. Can you pass to the next slide, please, Doug? So one of the first challenges that the scientific committee faced was the need for revisiting the definition of bullying, just on the next slide. The definition was initially proposed, as you know, by the seminal work of Donald Wales in Norway in the 70s. However, changes in the educational system and the ways in which interpersonal relationships happen, for instance, virtuality. When we were at school, there was no internet, no virtual relationships. And also the accumulated evidence on characteristics and promoting factors of bullying urged us for a renewed definition. We're still watching there. There it is. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble with my computer button.
So the day-to-day indistinct use of concepts such as bullying, aggression, violence in educational settings called our attention to clarify definitions that can inform preventive practices. So according to the current definition, the aggressive behavior labeled as bullying could involve implicit or explicit intent, although the intention might not always be to hurt the target, right? To hurt the target. Previous definitions also consider bullying as concerned largely with repeated aggressive behavior that occurs between two individuals or a group against one individual who is unable to make it stop. Echoing the work of many scholars and international organizations into recent years, the scientific committee considered that commonly used definition of bullying and identified a need to adopt more inclusive consideration of bullying that reflect the growth of understanding in bullying prevention and intervention. So we're trying to make it a little bit more complex, this definition, more updated. This revised definition recognizes that bullying of students occurs within a system of relationships and power structures that exist both within the school, but also outside the school, connected in this interconnection that I was explaining before. As a result, students involved in bullying may do it as a result of group dynamics rather than because they want to intentionally harm the student who is targeted. In this sense, our understanding of bullying needs to overcome an individual approach focusing on psychological characteristics and focus more on peer dynamics. So we understand bullying as a peer phenomenon, as a relational phenomenon, instead of just as a psychological individual phenomenon. And moreover, a more comprehensive definition also acknowledges that bullying often implies an absence of responses and care towards targets by peers and adults. So basically the absence of a caring environment constitutes a fertile ground for bullying to appear. So if we want to tackle bullying, we should clarify this, that bullying implies an absence of care and we should promote caring relationships. In this sense, it's important to stress the actual harm caused by bullying, regardless of the intention to harm. Harm should be seen from the perspective of the target, not from the perpetrator. As shown by research, bullying might be functional within the peer ecology, for instance, to achieve status, and therefore might not be intended to harm the target. So we need to focus on the experience of the target instead of trying to understand and imply intentions of the bully. And finally, in light especially of new technologies and the increase in cyberbullying, a revised definition should also make clear that repetition is not only linked to the number of times that an incident of bullying occur, but also relates to the fear of the target that a once-off event might be repeated or reshared online. In other words, bullying constitutes an abusive relationship, not an aggressive event. So we're understanding this as a relation, but not limited to the number of times of an aggressive behavior, but the configuration of a relationship of abuse and fear. The suggestions to revisit the definition of bullying are not merely theoretical. A more inclusive definition is hoped to trigger more comprehensive and targeted initiatives to tackle bullying in schools, as well as the development of perfected tools to measure it. If you could pass the next slide, please, Doug. So in our revision of the existing literature and consultation with experts around the globe, we identified several components that together set up the whole education approach already mentioned. These components may look familiar to you since the framework is similar to approaches to other phenomena, and overall they share a focus on promotion of positive development and positive school climate. We identified 9 components that are based on evidence and that we will discuss more broadly in a couple of minutes by James in his presentation. So in overall perspective, these components include political leadership and robust policy frameworks. For effective school violence prevention to happen, the curriculum should promote a caring school climate, and training and support for teachers and other school staff are very important. The provision of safe psychological and physical school environments also plays a key role, including mechanisms to report bullying and to support the affected students. Everyone who is part of the school community should be involved and empowered. That includes parents and, very important, students themselves. In all countries where we have observed a successful response to school violence, this response has been led by the education sector. However, educational authorities work with a broad range of partners, include other government sectors, civil society organizations, and academia. So we need to create this network to address bullying. This is, in a nutshell, what a country should do in order to prevent school violence. Of course, how these components are brought together into practice needs to be acknowledged in each country, and we need to consider the particularities of each context and community. If you can pass the next slide, please. And before turning to each specific component, let me highlight some key characteristics of this whole education approach and how these 9 components interact in what we found based on evidence as preventing bullying. First of all, this is not a shopping list or a menu from which you can pick just a few interventions. All components are essential and should be combined for your response to be effective. So we understand that these components need to work together and they are interdependent, one on the other. Interventions should be implemented in a way that is sustainable. So basically once-off measures like prevention campaigns once a year don't work. We need to have something that is integrated in the school culture and the system. Right? Coverage is also important. If your objective is to reduce the prevalence of school violence at the national or sub-national level, you will better choose programs that can be implemented effectively in all schools and communities. And it shouldn't be up to schools to do everything. The education authorities must provide guidance and resources, and success will happen only if the entire education system is better equipped for this intervention. As mentioned before, no intervention is successful without the full involvement of students and of all students, not just some students, right? The whole student body. We know, for example, that all effective anti-bullying programs are based on empowerment and participation of bystanders. So we need to include the whole students community in these interventions. And finally, we also know that successful programs do not take a negative approach. That is, for instance, a focus on school violence. It's the opposite, actually. They actually focus on promoting respect and care. So they focus on creating positive, nurturing environments instead of just trying to take bullying out of schools. So these are some general characteristics of this whole education approach and the components. If you read the recommendations, you will find very practical strategies that we identified and actions for each of these 9 components that are based on evidence. And now I will turn to Professor James O'Higgins, the chair of the scientific committee, to address these 9 components each by each.
Thank you, Christian.
And thanks to Doug and to his team for inviting us to be part of this seminar today. So Christian has very helpfully there outlined the 9 core components that emerged from our work on the International Scientific Committee and for our collaboration with over 50 experts around the world. So I would like to just dig down a bit deeper now into those 9 components and just look at exactly what we mean by each of them. What are the key messages that we should take home from this? So the first one is strong political leadership and robust legal and policy framework. And one of the key and most important things here is that we need to have national leadership. It's critical. There has to be a champion at a national level who takes responsibility for pushing the agenda that contributes to tackling bullying and cyberbullying and violence in schools. In our own country here in Ireland in 2012 and 2013, we had a government minister who was the first government minister to prioritise school bullying for 20 years. And resulting in him, arising from him being such a strong champion for tackling bullying and cyberbullying, a number of initiatives were developed, and it really was a sea change in terms of how bullying is tackled in schools in Ireland. So that kind of national leadership is really, really key to the whole development of the whole education approach. And related to that then is the provision of anti-bullying laws, policies, frameworks, and guidelines in the context of the legislative framework in each jurisdiction. Again, as an example, here in Ireland, our government introduced an action plan on bullying with related school procedures that were required of each school in the country. And then at a local level, within each school, schools were expected to adapt and implement these schools according to their local school ethos. Our research at the Anti-Bullying Centre in DCU has found that about 50% of the schools have managed to achieve this, but the other 50% haven't, because they need more support from outside the school. And again, this I suppose reminds us of why we're moving from and moving beyond a whole school approach to a whole education approach, because not all of the answers lie within the school itself, and sometimes supports from outside agencies and stakeholders are needed. There should be laws and policies on inclusive education. So we have recognized ourselves as experts that bullying isn't just a dyadic experience between a perpetrator and a target. Often that perpetrator and target exists within a system, and that system can have hierarchies and can have biases and discriminatory processes within it. So there needs to be a law or laws that promote inclusive education and address identity-based bullying in particular, for example, race and sexuality. These can be translated then into explicit policies at the local level within schools. But without that framework of wider inclusion, equality legislation, it can be very difficult for schools then to tackle bullying and related issues. And then finally, in terms of a key message in terms of leadership and legal and policy framework, laws, policies and frameworks and guidelines need to evolve to keep up with the different forms of bullying and aggression and cyberbullying that are occurring. How people cyberbullied 20 years ago or 10 years ago is different to today. You know, 10 years ago, we would have been concerned about social media and Facebook and so on. Today, our concerns are more to do with apps and the use of apps and gaming, particularly for boys. So maybe we'll change to the, so research needs to inform the policies and laws and the practices, and that research needs to be current and up to date with how young people are being impacted by technology and other societal influences. So maybe we'll change to the next slide now, please. So in terms of key messages then for the next component, which was safe psychological and physical school and classroom environment. This is really important. It goes back to what Christian was saying a moment ago. Tackling bullying and other issues like this in schools is not about focusing on bullying and taking it out of the school. It's about creating an environment in the classroom and the wider school that's safe and happy and caring. So we would really like our education authorities, school principals, other school staff here to create an environment where students and the whole school community feel safe, secure, welcomed and supported. And this can be done in the most simple of ways. In one school I know, the school principal stands at the door of the school every morning and welcomes each child to the school as they come in, presenting a sense of his own presence, presenting a sense of safety and security and authority, which then imbues the whole school environment. All school staff, not only the teachers, should be sensitized and supported to fostering a caring school environment. An example there would be the importance in our culture here in Ireland and in the UK of special needs assistants and classroom assistants. Often they're the first to pick up an issue that's affecting a child negatively. The teacher can be more focused sometimes on getting through a curriculum, exams and so on. So somebody else like a special needs assistant, the school guidance counselor, the school chaplain, they can all contribute greatly to creating a school environment, but they need to be sensitized, and the teachers need to be sensitized to exactly how to recognize bullying as an issue. School leadership needs to model a caring relationship. And this is really important. I gave the example there of the school principal waiting at the school door every day to welcome the students as they come in. And there's a difference between an authoritative school principal, an authoritative school teacher, and an authoritarian teacher. We're not talking about authoritarianism here. We're talking about people who are in charge. And for a school environment and a classroom environment to feel safe, psychologically and physically and emotionally, the teacher, the principal, the SNA, the school chaplain, whoever it is, they need to be in charge. They need to be authoritative. That's really important key message to take away on that core component. And then every bullying situation should be recognized and responded to in a timely and consistent and effective way. This is so important, particularly to the parents of the children who are targeted. Often they feel that they have to push schools and push systems to get the problem addressed. But the first port of call should be the classroom teacher, who should be able to shut down an instance of bullying particularly quickly with good communication and working with everybody involved. So let's go to the next slide now, please. So in terms of the core component for training and support of teachers, it's really important that teachers should be supported through training, mentoring and accessing resources, talked a moment ago about the importance of sensitizing teachers, and this begins in their pre-service training. But it isn't just teachers, it's also the other members of staff as well, all who work collaboratively in the education of children and adolescents. So that kind of sensitization should reflect a broader training and mentoring program that teachers can access pretty easily enough, and that they have resources available to them in the classroom when they need support dealing with a bullying or a cyberbullying issue. There should be pre-service and in-service training to increase teachers' familiarity with bullying prevention and intervention, and this should be something that all teachers are required to do periodically. So go to the next slide now, please. So in terms of reporting mechanisms, this is something, again, that we feel a lot of work can be done here, and there are particular key messages we would like people to take away on this. Schools should have staff who are particularly responsible for monitoring bullying, and the reporting channels and mechanisms that are needed to ensure a safe and school and a happy school and a caring school should be accountable, they should be clear, and they should be consistent, so that the whole school community, parents, teachers, and children can use them together. And of course, they will be different in different age groups, and the school has to work that out for themselves. But what's really important here comes back in the research all the time. One of the reasons why children don't report bullying and cyberbullying to teachers is because they're not, they don't trust that they know what to do, or they don't know how things will be handled. And that's really important, so that we're consistent and clear about that. The school system should be integrated with the community supports and referral services. And this is particularly in relation to targets and to perpetrators who may need additional support that is only available outside the school. School can't provide all of the supports that children always need. But if we're clicked into the local social services, counselling services, medical services, policing services, and so on, they can all be called upon to support the school's response. And again, this is a way of illustrating that whole education approach, that whole society approach. Students in particular, but not exclusively, the targets and bystanders, as well as school staff, should feel that they can talk about bullying to a trusted person known to them in the school or outside the school. And this is really important, that a trusted adult in so many situations is a really important thing for a child to have, someone they could talk to. Now, we would encourage all schools to have an anti-bullying coordinator who leads and manages the response of the whole school around bullying in terms of prevention and intervention. But they may not be the trusted adult. Trust is based on relationship. So positive relationships with adults in the school and in the wider community will develop trusting relationships where children will then feel that there is someone, at least one person, that they know they can talk to about it. And collaboration should be established with social media platforms. So much so now today, we all know this, that the internet is pervasive, social media is pervasive, and young people today, and certainly our research, are most likely to be found on WhatsApp, they're most likely to be found on Instagram and gaming. And all of those companies that provide these services need to be engaged with. There can be an overarching approach to these companies in the traditional media of demonizing them and not working with them to find solutions to support children's safety. But in my experience, working with companies like Facebook and Instagram, they're extremely willing to work with educational stakeholders to try and find ways to improve on safety aspects for children. And that is something that needs to be done. A local school can do that to a point, but not as much as maybe a local education authority or a national authority. Thank you. Next slide, so please.
Sorry, it's not forwarding.
Okay, I can just talk on it if you like, that's fine.
You can, you can, on the same screen, there are some arrows on bottom on the left. Maybe you can move it there.
I'm not sure everybody's going to see that, though. I don't know why my computer is pushing the button to advance. It's not.
Or if you want, you can stop sharing screen and I can share it from my computer, or James himself.
Yeah, just
If you stop sharing, and we can share it and just.
okay. Sorry about this. I'm not sure why.
So James, would you share it?
Have you got it? If you can share it,
Yeah, I
Christian,
have
that
it.
would be
I have
great.
it. No problem.
Yeah, you have it close to hand. That would be great. Thank you.
Doug, you have to allow me to share screen. It's on the security.
You'll need to make him a co-host if you go to participants.
Or if you go to share.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Perfect.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Christian.
No problem. So you were on slide.
Keep going one more. That's it. Thank you very much. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Christian. So all of this desire to protect children and to help them to be safe and not to have to experience bullying is because we fundamentally affirm a child's right to education and a child's right to their own voice and agency as set down in the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child, Convention on the Rights of the Child. So student empowerment and participation has to be a key element in the development of a whole education approach. Bullying is a relational phenomenon that occurs within a network of people. So all students should be involved in the prevention program instead of focusing only on the perpetrator and the targets. So we need to see that the whole group is involved, not just those two, and that giving voice and agency to children is a way actually of preventing bullying and then of course intervening if needed. Bystanders play a key role in the dynamics of bullying and should be empowered to support students targeted by bullying. I know in my part of the world here in Ireland, there's an old-fashioned kind of thing among children. They seem to have picked it up in Victorian times and it's continued to this day, that you should never be a snitch, that you should never tell on someone else. That is really a really unhealthy thing for children to have learned. It's out there in the ether, and for some reason they have picked it up. So we need to educate children that actually reporting and telling is a really healthy and important thing to do for themselves and for others. Attention should be paid to the involvement of students who belong to minority groups in particular in designing and implementing bullying prevention strategies to ensure that these strategies are inclusive of all types of student. And again, if we don't recognize that all children have the right to access and participate in education equally, then we may give a dominant group more say or more power or more influence and inadvertently feed into the bullying process, particularly in relation to power dynamics. Student-led initiatives and peer approaches to prevent bullying should be implemented in conjunction with programs involving school staff and other adults. So central to these key messages are that children's rights must be at the center, children's voice and agency must be at the center, and that we will ultimately tackle bullying by motivating and animating that larger bystander group. Next slide, please, Christian.
There we go.
Thank you. So this is the component about curriculum learning and teaching to promote a caring school climate. This is really important. One of the things that came through very early to us on the scientific committee was that anti-bullying is not just about, as Christian said earlier on, taking bullying out of the school environment. It's about creating an atmosphere where there is a strong caring modus operandi, where care defines the space that these children are in, rather than other types of emotions. So bullying is an absence of care. So to reduce bullying, schools need to provide a student-centered and caring school ethos. And that comes down to really practical things, the way that we communicate with each other, recognizing each other's needs in the school. If one child has power because they have better books than another child, what do we do about that? It's really important that we pay attention to the minutiae of school climate in order to develop a caring school environment in which young people are actually safe and feel that they are not powerless. And to achieve this, student-centered teaching and learning is essential. So this is where teachers have to flip the classroom. No longer must a teacher be the person with all the answers and all the dominance in a classroom space. I know when we're training teachers here in Ireland, we look at the process of education and the way that they engage students. And if a teacher is talking too much, then that classroom is not student-centered. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the involvement of all the stakeholders is really important. And the stakeholders is not just the people in the school itself, it is the wider school, outside the school, the local community, wider society, and the whole education system. All stakeholders of the school community should be involved in anti-bullying initiatives, including principals, boards, teachers, other school staff, and so on. And all of these have an influence and have a role to play in tackling school bullying. It may be something, for example, that can involve a local arts group who can bring in performing arts or creative arts into the school environment. Or maybe part of the solution is to bring the children out of the school to another environment. Some of the research we've done here shows that those out of school experiences have a lasting effect when children are reintegrated then back into the school. The child is changed and the school is changed by an out of school experience. We have one particular project here in Dublin called Fighting Words, which is a project where children are taken for a day and they learn the power of words, and they actually produce a book, a collaborative book as part of that project. And then they bring that book back to the school, but they go back to the school as changed human beings with a greater sense of the power of language and the responsibility to use that. Really important, really interesting project, but it speaks to this thing of involving stakeholders and other agencies outside of the school. Of course, parents are essential to all of this. Children mostly learn to bully at home through the forms of interpersonal dynamic they experience at home, sense of power they have at home, and so on. So parents and parent teachers associations and national parents councils all have a really important role to play, because each parent sends their child to school every day in the hope that that child will be happy and safe and cared for as much as they would want them to be. And we need to listen to parents more and more in terms of how to be partners with them in the schooling process. Moving on to the next slide then, we're talking about evidence. Now, this is really something that I'm very interested in myself as a researcher in a university. Some countries and some jurisdictions are better than others at monitoring the prevalence of school bullying and monitoring the success of the initiatives to address school bullying. One of the problems we encountered on the scientific committee when we were looking at this aspect of the levers of success around what works for schools and works in jurisdictions that try to tackle bullying, is there's a lack of clarity around around evaluating these processes. So we have the Kiva process, for example, from Finland. We have the Alveus bullying anti-bullying program. In my own country, we have the Fuse program, and so on, and many others. But it hasn't really been possible to have a kind of a central observation of the prevalence of bullying as it relates to the implementation of these programs. And that is something that we feel resources should be assigned to at a national level, at a local level as well. And then finally, the next slide is on collaboration and partnerships between the education sector and a wide range of other partners. It's really important that education authorities should effectively collaborate with different sectors, including health and social services. We've touched on this a little bit earlier on. It's recognizing that the school exists within a wider system, and those wider systems all have things that can contribute to a school tackling bullying. Other relevant sectors should provide resources and support to reduce bullying and cyberbullying. And again, with the role of the social media companies is really important here. And I'm certainly seeing more and more of a willingness on their part to partnership with us in addressing bullying and cyberbullying. And then collaboration between the educational sector and academia is really important. I would say that, wouldn't I? We need to foster and enable research that's better able to understand bullying and how to reduce it. And that again would involve a certain amount of resourcing, but it can be done in partnership with schools. It doesn't have to be the professors in the ivory tower watching schools and measuring schools. We can involve the schools and the teachers and the kids as partners in designing and implementing research projects that will actually give us the data and the insights that we need to tackle bullying and cyberbullying. So that's me running very quickly through the key messages from our 9 core components. And thank you for your attention. And of course, Christian and myself and Young Fen will be happy to take any questions that people may have or comments to.
Thank you, James. That was an excellent overview and a quick trip through the report. The report is linked on our Fresh Webinars page, Fresh Partners webinar page, which people can go to, as will the recording from this session. So we're looking forward, these slides as well will be posted up there. I invite comments from others, and we have everybody on the screen now, and I know that a couple of us have been working on inclusive schools, which was touched on in the presentation. So I think there's going to be, there's value in looking across those other sectors. And Wadi, in an email this morning, noted his work with others on the role of police officers in schools. And I think that's another part of the interagency approach that's required. But I really like the beginning and the end of the presentation in terms of, with Christian taking the time to really walk us through and develop a really deeper understanding of the problem. If we jump into solutions without really understanding the nature of the problem and the nature of the solutions, and then James ended on that point as well. So really continuing to understand how the phenomena of bullying and aggression in schools evolves with the times, as it does normally. Especially these days with COVID, I'm sure there's going to be more and more urgency to this problem. So it was a really good place to start. But I'll open it up and just jump in, click on your mic, and we're a small enough group that we can have a pretty freewheeling discussion. So to just jump in.
Let me start if I could. And James and Christian, thanks for a really good presentation. I would fully agree with it. So there is not a critique coming here. A good deal of the work I've done with others over the past decade, particularly in the US, has really been talking about the types of things you're talking about. I like very much the notion of a whole education approach. I think that language is important. I want to suggest that there's a further way of elevating that linguistic change, because it's still very, very formal education centered. And actually, if we think about education and learning, it takes place formally and informally 24/7. And I think if one is to articulate that as well, that becomes really important. Without, elaborating a lot now in work that I have been doing on, science of learning and development, one of the things we talk about is that it is a 24/7 experience, and the conditions for learning and care that develop within, that we want in schools and supporting it outside, are important just as much if I'm benefiting from other types of learning, whether or not they're part of the curriculum. And then one last point that I actually learned very early from a colleague of Tim Lewis, a guy named Jeff Sprague in the US, is I was always talking about caring, and I think he was right. He talked about how do we build and sustain a capacity to care? And that really then forces the systems to really think about how do we create the conditions under which teachers and educators can do the types of things we want and equip young people to do that as well. So thank you very much. I want to leave time for other people.
James and Christian, a comment?
See, I would like to comment something on your first point, David. Thanks for your feedback. And I agree that we are still focusing on the school context. I recently finished a study on after-school activities and extracurricular activities overall. And it was really interesting to find that the same kids that we were assessing within the school settings, we found average levels of bullying, I don't know, 15%, 20%. We measured the same kids in these other spaces, and we found no evidence of aggression at all. Yeah. So there was no aggression, there was no violence there. And that make us think that actually violence and bullying is a social problem. It's a relational problem. It has not to do with people. So there's a lot to learn from those contexts that we can actually bring in the classroom. Yeah. And I think we are still working on that. And there's this group in the University of Virginia the Youth Next said that I know, and I'm sure you're familiar with many other scholars that are working on this topic. So thanks for your point. I'm not sure if you, James, want to comment too. You are on mute, James, I think.
Yeah.
Oh.
James, you're on mute.
Turn on your mic.
Oh.
It's on here now. Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so no, thanks, David, for your comments there, and you're bang on the money, because one of the long conversations we had on the International Scientific Committee was about the language that we would use for designating this approach, and we talked about whole society, whole community. And in the end, like all committees, we had a compromise, and we landed on whole community, whole education. But we are trying to capture that 24/7 approach. That's why there's such an emphasis on stakeholders and wider societal organizations and family life and community life and so on. But I take your point that the name doesn't always quite capture that, and we should continue to try and improve on the language we use around that. And then just building on Christian's point there about, if I understood it right, Christian, that the children who were perpetrators in school, you found, and out of school, they were not perpetrators.
Exactly. So basically, we found aggression dynamics within the school settings that there were not present between the same kids in after-school programs, right?
So that really makes me wonder about what's going on with our schools, that it's producing perpetrators like that. And we have to, and that speaks to David's point about caring environments and how do we build capacity for care. So I think the first thing in our schools we need to do is care for teachers and care for staff and help them care for each other. And if they feel cared for, then I think they will create caring. They'll be pretty strong agents of creating a capacity for care within the school. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Tim, I'm going to ask you to jump in. I was noting we're working on Tim Lewis is involved in the Positive Behavior Intervention Support Program in the U.S. and worldwide, and one of the little pieces that they focus on is that greeting at the school door. It's actually, they have a document on that. So Tim, do you want to just comment generally on the session, and the materials on Tim's website are just really numerous. It's really a real resource for people. Tim?
Sure. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I love the idea of expanding the definition that Mulveus put out, 30, 40 years ago. I think an expansion is long overdue. So I really appreciated that. I think what we've attempted to do is to provide those structures and systems within school, and then also make those connect points to the community, whether it's families, whether it's the community at large, whether it's mental health professionals. Someone mentioned law enforcement as well. So, one of the things that we really sort of stress is that positive behavior supports is a framework. It's not a package or a program. And many of our schools are facing bullying challenges, and they don't know how to get their arms wrapped around it, or they want to kind of chase the shiny new program. And they think, well, if we just follow the package, then bullying will go away. And it's like, well, no, if it was that simple, we wouldn't continue this conversation. So no, I really liked the expansion. I thought it was great. I think it fits really, really well, and, as mentioned, even something as simple as saying hello to kids in the morning, greeting them and setting the day up positively and creating kind of those safe, secure environments. I think the one thing that research has shown us over many years now is, yes, we need to address the perpetrator and the victim, but it's always about those other kids. And through our sort of school-wide framework and teaching kids about being respectful and being responsible, we're giving them strategies to step up and to say no and to advocate for those victims. I think the other point that continues to be a challenge, and we find in our own research, is educators are still kind of blind to where bullying occurs. When we survey educators, it's still, it's the hallway, it's the bathroom, it's the playground. And we point out that oftentimes the number one location of bullying behavior is the classroom. And they're like, oh, that can't be. It's like, no, it is. That's what kids are telling us. So, I think another point, and again, I keep going back to that expansion in your definition, is I think that speaks to that the context has to be factored in here, because at the end of the day, it's all about the context. Kids will always, quote unquote, bully. There will always be victims. We're never going to eradicate that. It's kind of, it's been around forever, and I don't see it ever going away. But by addressing and focusing on those contexts, by building capacity, we can start to lessen the potential impact of the behavior, particularly on those victims and those bystanders.
Yeah, thank you.
Wadid, do you want to just jump in and tell us a little bit about the work you're doing with your colleague around school resource officers and police officers in schools, or anything else? Wadid works with the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and has a big interest in safe schools, obviously. Wadid?
Thank you very much, Doug. I mean, I just want to echo the positive feedback regarding the very insightful presentation given. I mean, particularly in this perspective of, this definition, redescription of bullying from a perception of the recipient of the bullying, as well as its frequency of occurrence, given the change of context that is currently occurring in the sense of where bullying can occur in terms of the social media that are available. Probably contextualized also in the context of COVID-19 and the distance learning that is happening more and more frequently now. So from my side, I come from a drug prevention angle, really on the UNODC spectrum of work. So that's why from my side, I see bullying as one of the mediating factors rather than an outcome prevention per se. But, I have colleagues that, in the violence angle that I work within UNODC that really perceive bullying as one of the angles to tackle by itself. But from my perspective, it's also a factor that is linked with mental health outcomes in the children. And that is indirectly mediating factor that is linked with other sort of risky outcomes beyond the bullying per se. And that's where we're trying to diversify when we say the role of other community counterparts in the school. For example, we know that police force are trying to play a role in the perspective of directly drug prevention in schools, with programs being not very effective, where the teachers can play a more effective role. But we're trying to expand that role in the sense of how they can play a more positive role in other mediating factors within the schools, where their role might be more effective, including bullying, for instance. And this is where we're trying to get more and more insights. That's one small angle. Maybe in the expert opinion will be key. What could potentially be a role in terms of other potential counterparts outside the school, for example, law enforcement, that could further benefit bullying prevention activities within school that might extrapolate to larger work? This is this is just the idea that is going through in terms of working into the other counterparts outside school playing a more effective role needs to be sort of strengthened by more and more evidence that, maybe like not in this direction, but maybe in another direction, your role might be more effective. And this is where maybe if the insight comes from the bullying angle, there's any experience in terms of the law enforcement role within, as an extra layer within the community center, can play a role within the school setting in that prevention. What sort of direction could you advise? And maybe we can touch base on a bilateral level with the expert to get that insight, because this is the direction where we're going through. But overall, it was really insightful, and thank you very much for this talk.
Christian and James, comments?
Christian, do you want to respond?
Go ahead, James.
Thanks, Christian. I was just going to say, Wadid, that I think you've pointed to the solution there yourself already. The research that we've done here shows that external agencies providing support and programs and speakers to schools and are limited in their success if what they offer is not embedded into the school itself. So that kind of partnership we were talking about with external agencies, whether it's police force or health services or whatever, just bringing somebody in to give a talk or to run a program, and then that's divorced from the rest of the life of the school, is limited in its success. And so it needs a much deeper engagement with the existing program of study within the school and the program of prevention and intervention. I think you've hinted at that yourself there. So that, of course, requires a lot more work on the part of all the partners, but the planning and the deep thinking and reflection that's required to be successful in that way will achieve a lot more in the long term.
I just wanted to add very, very shortly that what is common, same as Tim and David, they all point that we shouldn't be focusing on bullying itself, but we should focus on what we want to create in terms of personal relationships, right? So either citizenship, either partnership, but we're trying to build on something different instead of just tackling on bullying as the problem. It should be taken as a symptom, so to say. And yeah, I also want to stress that the report that we built with the scientific committee was really conservative in terms of trying to be evidence-based. So we tried to actually revise what was there in the literature instead of giving our opinions as experts. So, and I think that's also very, very important that we are trying to bring together, right, the evidence that is there worldwide. So in this sense, we can trust the approach that we built together.
Great. I'm going to ask Marie or Emily any comments or questions about the discussion thus far. Emily works with the UN agency group on school health and nutrition, led by UNESCO as well, or Marie. I'm not sure if Marie we've met, but jump in if you have a comment or a question.
Okay, thank you for. Oh.
Go ahead, Marie.
No.
Go ahead.
You both clicked off your mic. Anybody? Marie, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you really for this very good and clear presentation. As Doug was saying, I don't work specifically on school violence or bullying. Or the approach we're trying to promote within the UN system is better collaboration around school health as an overall umbrella, and safe learning spaces and environments are definitely part of that. So it's really interesting to see how this area of work fits within a broader topic as we see it, which is the health and how schools can contribute to promote children's well-being and health. So thank you for that. And it's the framework and the entry points you have highlighted very much fit within a framework for better promotion of health within school environments. So that's really great. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Emily. And just to move towards closing, and we're not going to be able to get to our business agenda for today. Partly my fault in the delays in invitations to the meetings. We'll pick it up. But there is one that I noted in the presentations that there was a link to Goal 16 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, peace, order, and good government. And that's one of the challenges for the FRESH partnership. Most of our work of our partners has been around the other side of the circle, around hunger and poverty and sanitation and helping kids get into school, the barriers to preventing kids getting into school, primarily in low resource countries, but not exclusively. And so it's good to move around to the other parts of the circle, which reflect the whole child being in the whole school and the whole community. So it's really helpful to broaden it. And I'm going to follow up with Yongfeng and others to see if we can bring this discussion about bullying and safe and caring schools more actively into another series of discussions that have started with a number of other organizations around the table, including the Global Partnership for Education and the Soros Foundations and Tim's group, David's group, around inclusive schools. And we're kind of trying to look at how we can include students in schools, obviously, but you end up breaking it down to different barriers, different things that push kids out or fade the kids out of school or whatever. And so we're hoping to have a series of discussions to kind of broaden that. you may have noticed that the Global Education and Monitoring Report for 2020 was focused on inclusion. And with UNESCO as helping us out, we're having an ongoing discussion. And there may very well be some interesting connections made. And so this excellent project on school bullying or bullying prevention in schools has been very, very helpful. So thank you very much, both of you, for your remarks today. And we'll look forward to further discussions moving forward. Yongfeng, thanks for jumping in in making the remarks, and I'll leave the three of you with any final thoughts if you wanted to. Where should we go from here? What are the things that we need to do that are most important and most urgent? And then we'll close up the session. Yongfeng or James or Christian?
Well, thank you, everybody, and presenters, and also the very insightful comments from the others. I don't have anything to add at this point, but very happy to continue working with you. And
Great.
there will be a lot to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and to everybody else who participated today. I know that Christian and myself and the rest of the scientific committee working with UNESCO are really just going back to your last point, we really see the work that we're doing around bullying prevention and intervention as being part of that circle of the sustainable development goals, and that no more than our 9 core components is not a menu where you can just select what you want. I think it's the same with the sustainable development goals, that this fits in just as importantly with those basic lower order things like poverty, food, water, access to education. Bullying is and inclusion and equality are all linked to those issues, and usually where you find somebody is or a population is lacking in some of those basic needs like food and water and access to education, you'll find that there's also an imbalance of power in that society. And so ultimately, if we don't capture the bullying that's going on in schools and tackle it, it will lead to a society where bullying and aggressive behavior is the norm, and exclusion rather than inclusion is the norm as well. So I think all of the things in the circle of sustainable development goals are equally important and need to be worked on together. So let's work on all those together in the future.
Great. Christian?
I think I will just echo James. So thank you very much to everyone, and totally agree.
Okay, and a special thanks to Christian for jumping in. My wife has promised me a new computer for Christmas. And obviously that's another button that's going on my computer screen about advancing slides. So thanks very much for
no problem.
jumping in. Great, so I'm gonna finish up the session. I'm gonna hopefully stop the recording here. And if you go to fresh-partners.org, that's where and look for the webinars page, that's where the recording and the resources from this are posted.